Are you the one they call Beowulf?
Hey there, Enthusiacs. Welcome back to Hero Talk. I am your host, Judge Greg. Joining me today, I have Kynetyk. Hey, Nick. Welcome back to Hero Talk.
Thanks, dude.
All right. Today's film is the 2007 American 3D motion capture epic fantasy film, Wow, directed by Robert Zemeckis, Beowulf. So this was this was really big. This was back when the 3D really kind of started expanding in terms of the movie theaters, and I mean it's everywhere now, and it is infuriating. And in fact, I don't know if you know this, Nick. I may not have told you this. I actually bought 2D glasses that I can take with me to a 3D picture, so that it will convert the 3D movie back to 2D for me. So that, because 3D movies get all the good times now.
Really?
Yeah, well, So for Suicide Squad, if you go back and listen to that podcast, I had mentioned that, like, the Suicide Squad basically had, like, 1 or 10, and those were, like, the only show times. I'm like, well, that doesn't really work for me. I'm either going in the middle of the day when I can't really go because, you know, I've got the whole family thing I'm trying to handle. And then you've got that 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. I'm not going to be able to stay awake for a movie that starts 10 o'clock at night. You know, I have an alarm clock in the morning that is unrelenting and unforgiving and keeps asking me if I want to build a snowman.
I am not exactly sure what to say to that one.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a Frozen thing, huh?
It is. That is a Frozen thing.
Okay. At least I was able to follow you that far.
There we go. So, anyway.
I'm going to have to see Frozen someday, I suppose.
Well, that needs to be a Hero Talk, I think.
That sounds reasonable, I suppose.
As many times as I've seen that movie, it really needs to be a Hero Talk.
Yeah.
I should. Whenever I go to the new format, maybe I'll do that. That'll be my first one. Who knows? I'm not committing to that, but that'd be pretty neat. But anyway, now we're talking about Beowulf. I saw this in the theater when it came out.
So did I.
In 3D, before I realized that 3D movies are like stabbing myself in the brain through the eyes. And this one wasn't too bad, if I remember correctly, but looking at it now and watching it again, it has not aged gracefully.
No, it has not. When I was watching it, just the animation and the mocap and everything, it's, you know, all those complaints that you have that you hear about the waxy, unrealistic figures from the Polar Express, and I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh yeah, oh right, thank you, Zemeckis.
Yeah, and I've used this joke before, but it's a Judge Greg original, so I feel I am completely free to use it again as I want to. But Beowulf was so entrenched in the uncanny valley, it built 4 houses and a hotel. I was so just absolutely put off by how it has aged. And I mean, it's the danger of doing something like this, because if you try to go hyper realistic, then you immediately age it, because when things get better, this will not look as good as it looked.
That's definitely one of the pitfalls of special effects, and in particular computer generated effects. And since this was all computer animated, then right. And there was just parts where, like, their eyes were so dead that it looked like they weren't even focusing on anything, that they were talking to each other and each person was just staring off into the distance.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna not date yourself, you need to be very stylized, you know, like a Pixar Toy Story thing, because Woody can look like he has dead, lifeless eyes because he's supposed to be a toy.
Yeah.
Although even when you go back and watch Toy Story 1, Woody has more life in his eyes than Beowulf has in this film.
That's true. That's true.
And more personality too. I mean, I don't dislike the film. I still watched it. I was still entertained by it. But I would say, objectively looking at it, it kind of makes your skin crawl a little bit when you think about how it's aged.
The weird thing is, there's either an acclamation to it, or just the early scenes in the movie were worse, because like the moment the movie started, when I was rewatching it for this, it really just smashed me in the face how awkward things looked. And as the movie went on, it either got better or I just didn't care as much. I got used to it or something.
It's like your brain just decided it couldn't be bothered anymore. Like, listen, if you're just going to subject us to this, we're just going to go ahead and turn down the resolution a little bit.
Yep, something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess that's my general impression. I kind of like the movie, but it is not aged well, and it kind of sounds like you're in the same boat as me.
Yeah, pretty much, generally speaking.
Yeah, I will say, like, as I look, especially as I'm looking through IMDb now to try to intelligently talk about this film, I realize somewhere through I have once again picked a movie where I have no prayer of being able to correctly pronounce anybody or anyone's name. Other than Beowulf, I got Beowulf and Grendel, and Grendel's mother. I can say Grendel's mother, but there we go. After that, I'm just gonna do my best and understand that okay, it's old English. What do you want from me?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll try to help you as the characters come up. I think
Yeah.
I can get most of them.
Yeah. So one more thing before we go into the cast. This movie, and it's not just this movie. I don't want to pick on this movie because a lot of 3D movies were doing it back then, but man, it was all about the cheap 3D tricks to try to make things look like they're pointing at you and coming at you and in your face.
Yeah, there were a few, a lot of 3D movies, like all 3D movies, up until this most recent sort of string of them where it became so normalized you couldn't do the shock treatment like that anymore. Most 3D movies have one or two moments like that, and this one had, I don't know, 4 or 5.
Yeah, I mean,
Really,
I counted
really
more than that.
obvious.
It seemed like every scene had something like, whoa, look what's coming at you. And I remember getting sick of it in the theater, and when you watch it in 2D now on a screen, it's especially old. It's not even in 3D now. Like, it just looks like the man has a massively large spear. It doesn't look like it's coming at me. That's the one that really bothers me, because it does. When you look at it in 2D, when the guard comes up on Beowulf on the beach, it just looks like his spear is massive.
Yeah,
I do
it's
not
got
get
that
the impression
forced perspective thing going on.
Yeah, it just didn't really work, but it's just cheap tricks. Like, it's the kind of stuff that I expect. Now, I'm saying this, as you know, I just got back from Disney World, and one of the things they have at the Magic Kingdom is this short, like, 10-minute show called Mickey's PhilharMagic, which is in 3D, and also gives me a headache, but it's only 10 minutes, so, like, it's not too bad, so I can just kind of sit through it and then go on and not be that affected. My daughter loves it, so we went in there. I think we saw it twice while we were there, and it's nothing but those 3D in-your-face tricks. But it's 10 minutes, it's its shtick, and then it's done. When a movie is trying to, like, tell the ancient story of Beowulf, the oldest known Old English long poem on this planet, and in the same time, it's like, look at the coins coming at your face. Oh, look at this thing's coming at you. Uh-oh, this thing's poking you in the eye. Like, I'm half expecting Beowulf to take out a yo-yo and start throwing it at the screen, you know?
Yeah, and for that matter, this was not exactly the most faithful retelling of Beowulf.
It was not. Now, I don't know a whole awful lot about Beowulf. I mean, I have seen many, many different adaptions. I have never read the original poem.
Yeah, I finished the original poem, and I even read Eaters of the Dead.
Yeah.
We watched Beowulf and Grendel once, and the main thing I remember about that was the accents were all over the place.
They were, yes. I saw a Beowulf that was like a weird futuristic dystopian Beowulf.
Is that the one with, Christopher Lambert? Or
it is.
something?
Yes, it is. Yes. It is not good.
That's hardly a surprise.
Yeah, but let's see. There was a lot of different like they portrayed Beowulf as highly flawed. I mean, flawed
in
to,
the 2007 one. Not
in the 2007. Yeah, I should say. I'm speaking of the 2007 movie. Some of the changes, like Beowulf, I know that he is traditionally portrayed as unambiguously heroic.
Yes.
And in
he's
one,
straight up Superman, pretty much.
Yeah, and in this, he's very flawed and
he's a lusty braggart.
Yeah. Hrothgar they made into an alcoholic.
Yeah,
and
he was of dubious character from the onset,
and mostly naked most of the time for reasons that I'm not quite familiar with. They added in, and I don't think the original poem had this, like, they were really heavy-handed with the story being set as Roman Catholicism started spreading.
Oddly enough, the original Beowulf, at least the recorded version, has a whole lot of, references to strength being granted by Almighty God and all kinds of stuff like that. Although there's a lot of my understanding is there's a lot of suspicion that was added by people later.
Oh,
and
okay.
the original version, which long predates the written version, didn't include those notes.
Right.
But yeah,
fair.
like, so I mean, I can understand to some extent the sort of sense of encroachment of Catholic dogma, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it was done in a very strange way,
Yeah.
in my opinion, but in principle, I can kind of get it.
Mm-hmm. Then there was the idea of Grendel. Instead of being a monster, he was portrayed very
Sympathetically.
Yeah. I get he was almost childlike.
Yeah, he had a super sensitive ear, like an exposed eardrum,
Mm-hmm.
which the partying at the mead hall that had a name that I can't remember just drove him just nuts. And
Herod was the name.
Herod, yeah.
I'm going to stick with what I said.
And so he just went in and went sick house on everybody mainly to get them to shut up.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I kind of liken it to the Cloverfield monster, because they've come out and said after Cloverfield, like, the Cloverfield monster was supposed to be like, this is just a toddler throwing a tantrum, except the toddler's giant and can level a city. But it was kind of like that. It was a very. I mean, he had the mentality of almost a 4 or 5 year old.
Yeah, and even at that, it was, you know. He's presented in that sympathetic light, but it certainly doesn't help his presentation to other people when he's like ripping a dude in half and drinking the blood.
Yeah, he bit the head off one guy just because and chewed it up.
Yeah.
I mean, he was certainly not a good character, but he was more sympathetic as to why he was attacking them.
Yeah, and that's another difference from the original one where Grendel was just a monster.
Right. Now in the original, was there that whole side thing going on between Grendel's mother and Beowulf that produced the dragon?
Grendel's mother was the dragon was unrelated. Grendel's mother was just the mother of the demon, and even older, more powerful demon.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah. There's none of the suggested siring of the dragon between Beowulf and Grendel's mother. No, the dragon was just a dragon.
Okay, I'm trying to remember stuff like that. And then that whole end scene, of course, was just completely made up about Beowulf's funeral, and then Beowulf's buddy, I'm trying to think his name. What was it?
Wiglaf?
Wiglaf, yeah, sure, Wiglaf. So, anyway, I think that's enough difference. Let's talk about the cast.
The original one did have the big funeral pyre, but Grendel's mother was dead at that point, so...
Okay. I will say, like, if you're going to make the 2007 film, I don't mind the changes they made. You got to remember, the original poem, most anyone can tell, was written in around the year 1000 AD.
Yeah,
give
somewhere.
or take. Yeah.
Yeah, like 900, 1000, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously storytelling has I'm not going to say advanced or matured, but it's changed. It's not quite the same beast it used to be.
Well, we also don't have to commit it to memory rather than writing things down, and to help in memorization make things alliterative and follow a meter.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, you're free to make changes. So, anyway, the cast. Let's talk about the cast.
All right.
And I guess we should talk about the main guy, which would be Beowulf.
Are you looking up his name right now?
I am looking up his name. Well, for whatever reason, on IMDb, he is, like, not listed on the main list, which is really strange. Like, it starts with Robin Wright as Wilthau, and I don't really understand why she gets top billing. Her part wasn't very big. I mean, there's not a whole lot I can say about her. I've talked about her already. So Ray Winstone.
Yeah, that was
Ray Winstone as Beowulf, and also played the dragon and the Golden Man.
Which were the same character.
Yeah, which were the same character, but
and had maybe 2 lines.
I think the Golden Man only had like 2 lines. He was in the dream, and then he said something to John Malkovich. Yeah. Unferth was his name.
Yeah.
So Ray Winstone. Now, some of the characters in here were modeled after their voice actor, and some were modeled loosely. Now Ray Winstone, I immediately remember Ray Winstone as being Mac from that new Indiana Jones movie, the Crystal Skull one.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not have the Beowulf build.
No. Few people do.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if he just sort of did the mocap and then they made him look like he went through the 300 school of working out.
Well, I don't think
Or do you think somebody else did the mocap and he just did the voice?
There's a distinct possibility of the latter. Maybe they mocapped his face or something.
Yeah. Well, because for some people, like Grendel was played by Kristen Glover, and Kristen Glover actually did the mocap for Grendel.
Yeah, I didn't look into any of the who did mocap for what. So
yeah, I didn't a little bit. I just as I read up a little bit about these movies for Hero Talk so that I can talk intelligently about them for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. One of the things I realized, because it was kind of odd to me that Kristen Glover played Grendel, because Robert Zemeckis and Kristen Glover didn't really work out so well for each other in Back to the Future. In fact, very famously, he did not come back in the subsequent Back to the Future movies because Robert Zemeckis said he was very difficult to work with. And apparently Zemeckis had said, like, well, since this was all mocap work, we only need the one take, and then I could worry about what angles I need later, so I don't need to keep doing take after take with them. So
that's kind of funny, because it's almost like a very it almost sounds like Zemeckis' whole mocap approach was focused on convenience.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, it's almost a sort of laziness, which kind of speaks to why the whole enterprise folded in on itself after 3 or 4 movies.
Yeah. I mean, it can be done okay, but I wonder how much that adds to the budget that you couldn't have done practically.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen similar movies. I mean, we just talked about 13th Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And so 13th Warrior was able to do more with less than this movie did, I think.
Well, I'm not sure. What was the budget for Beowulf? Because there were estimates for 13th Warrior that the budget was between 130 or 180 million dollars.
Oh, was it really that much?
It was a very expensive movie.
We just talked about it not that long ago, but I'm trying to. Beowulf. I think the budget for Beowulf was 150,000. But 13th Warrior, I like the budget. The last one I read, and I think the one that we cited on the podcast, was 85 million.
It's one of those things where you don't get almost no one's going to be interested in giving you the exact number.
Yeah, and I mean, it seemed really expensive for something that is now far more dated than the 13th Warrior was, which is telling a very similar, incredibly similar story,
Yeah.
I think this movie would have benefited greatly from Herger being a part of it.
Many movies would benefit from Herger being a part of it.
I'd like to just see Herger in almost every movie. Honestly, I think if I could see Herger and Amanda Waller just show up in every movie I see, I would be perfectly happy. I could watch anything. Man, imagine Frozen with that being the case.
No.
All right. What are we talking about?
We're supposed to be talking about Beowulf, and then we started talking. We left off with Ray Winstone.
Yeah, we left off with Ray Winstone, and now we're talking about the hypothetical Suicide Squad, Frozen, 13th Warrior crossover. Which I'd watch. I would watch that.
The main thing I got from Ray Winstone was an example of how a lot of the accents in this movie are kind of all over the place too.
Oh, they were. Well, I think Anthony Hopkins
not as bad as Beowulf and Grendel,
yeah,
but kind of all over the place.
Anthony Hopkins was doing Welsh, and some people just weren't doing an accent, and some people were just trying to sound vaguely English.
As opposed to Grendel, who was actually speaking Old English.
Yeah, Grendel spoke exclusively in Old English,
which
Grendel's
made it
mother
really hard to understand him.
Incredibly hard, and they'd have these conversations, Grendel and his mother,
yeah,
and they went on for a long time, and I have no idea what he's saying, and the closed captioning does not help at all. The closed captioning just says speaking Old English.
Jeez. Something along the lines of "They murdered me so strong, Beowulf."
Yeah, I think at one point he says he didn't harm Hrothgar.
Yeah,
and he says something like no harm, or something like that.
Yeah.
So did Grendel know Hrothgar was his dad?
That wasn't explicitly stated, but you can kind of infer it. One way or the other, Grendel's mother told him not to harm Hrothgar.
Yeah, it was during his initial run. I'm going way out of order, but when his initial run on the Harrowt Hall, he faced Hrothgar, and they had this face down, and then almost like Hrothgar fell backwards, and I don't know why, and Grendel just took off. I'm like, so was that Anthony Hopkins basically going like, I can't kill my own son, or was that Grendel going, I can't fight you because you're my dad? I really had trouble understanding what was going on there.
Well, okay, so the way the movie presents it, whatever you can make of Hrothgar as he was shown at the time in the movie, apparently in the past he was a pretty powerful warrior because apparently he himself killed a dragon in his youth.
He sure did.
And at some point went to defeat Grendel's mother, and the same thing that we see happen with Beowulf later happened, and he wound up siring Grendel. And so he knows Grendel's around, and it's an old shame of his.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Grendel shows up and it's kind of a despair point for him. He's, everything's going wrong because of a moment of weakness or poor judgment from him in the past. And so he's trying to challenge Grendel to fight him. And then it's just sort of a standoff, and, eventually Grendel just leaves. So,
yeah, I think if this movie taught me nothing else, it's that I do not want to see the results of Anthony Hopkins and Angelina Jolie having a baby. It was a little weird that, like Grendel came out and he was very malformed and very grotesque looking.
Yeah.
And then when Beowulf sires the dragon or the golden man, he's like a golden statuesque man, like the little Oscar guy.
Yeah, pretty much.
His full size, who could transform into a giant fire breathing dragon. I thought, wow, Hrothgar, what was up with you? What did you pass on, man? That was Beowulf made a dragon.
Well, here's the point where I got to point out that Zemeckis himself said he didn't like the Beowulf poem or the story, I guess, and
seems like the perfect choice to direct. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why I think that's why some of the story was an attempted deconstruction of the original story, where Beowulf is, beyond reproach, just super powerful and awesome guy. There's not much character drama there. And so here he's shown to have his own weaknesses. He's shown to be a braggart. He's shown to be lustful, and shown to be untrustworthy when it comes to the confrontation with Grendel's mother, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when it comes to those sort of narrative cheats about why Hrothgar gave birth to Grendel while Beowulf sired the dragon, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it seems to me like kind of that sense of laziness that I mentioned before from Zemeckis kind of shines through here. He was not interested in actually working with the source material and was trying to rework it into something else. And, an adaptation is okay. I'm fine with an adaptation, but
I'm with you on that one. It was odd in that he went two different narrative routes that didn't quite seem like they fit in the same full total narrative.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so Hrothgar was played by Anthony Hopkins. I'm not going to list what Anthony Hopkins has been in, because he's been in everything. You obviously probably know who Anthony Hopkins is. Most notable for playing Hannibal Lecter. He's currently playing Odin in the Thor series. So I think he was on tap to play Jor-El at one point in time, but that fell through.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, he said it on an old Conan O'Brien interview. He said that he was going to be playing Jor-El coming up, and I think it was going to be maybe that Nick Cage movie that never happened.
Maybe the one that they were going to try to get Kevin Smith to write for.
Yeah, the giant mechanical spider.
Yeah, and Brainiac fighting polar bears.
Brainiac fighting polar bears. That's correct. That was somewhere in the script.
Yeah. The producer, when he was being read the story treatment, said, "You need an action beat here."
Yeah. Yeah, that was it. The story Kevin Smith tells dealing with that producer is very telling. And I am not somebody who just likes what Kevin Smith does and everything, and I'm not really a big fan of Kevin Smith. I think some things he does are very good, and some things that he does are not very good, and I don't think Kevin Smith can tell the difference when he's making it. But when he tells that story, it's actually very entertaining and very telling, and I tend to believe more than I don't about his, because I'm sure he has to, when you're telling the story, and especially when you're doing it as he does on a big stage show, you need to embellish some of the details, and I don't hold it against a person for doing it. You're trying to entertain people, so you sort of have to make it a compelling story.
He's not a bad oral storyteller.
No. But I get a feeling that a lot of what he said is probably more true than not.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the cast, Robin Wright plays Wealhtheow, who was the queen to Hrothgar, and then again the queen to Beowulf.
Yeah.
Played by Robin Wright, who I think was Robin Wright Penn back then. We've talked about her before. She was in Princess Bride, which everyone knows her from, and she played Buttercup, and I dislike that character. I have really nothing else to say about her.
And there's also John Malkovich playing Unferth.
Playing Unferth, yeah, who was unmistakable as John Malkovich. Did he even attempt an accent at all?
No.
Yeah.
I think this is one of his, what was it? The Nostalgia Chick once referred to it as a man upset about his order at the Olive Garden.
Yeah.
Just kind of a little short, but not exactly inspired.
Yeah, he was. He was John Malkovich. He was fine for what he was. The character was not really very well presented in this. In terms of just, I remember when I first saw it, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop for Unferth. Like I'm waiting for okay, so what does this character have? What's finally going to happen? And the answer was nothing.
Yeah, he's pretty much all he did was present Beowulf the sword, and his slave took the golden horn, which broke the agreement with Grendel's mother that then brought the dragon in the years later. But I think his character was mostly just another one of those examples or victims, you might say, of the reworking of the story. They wanted to have that one person call out Beowulf as a braggart. And if you're going to do that, you're going to need to kind of flesh out this character some more, but they never really did anything with it other than I think he was the one that got burned by the dragon at the end and started yelling, "Sins of the Father, sins of the Father."
Yes, that was him.
So, he went from doubting Beowulf to believing in Beowulf back to doubting Beowulf. Was that supposed to be his character arc?
I guess. It was really, like I said, I really felt like they were building up some final confrontation between Unferth and Beowulf that just never happened, and that Sins of the Father thing just didn't cut it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I was constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it never did.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is one of those things that points out, to my mind at least, how in attempting to adapt the story for modern audiences and modern storytelling, trying to deconstruct the myth, because the original one is very much just straightforward. The hero did this, the hero overcame that, the hero overcame this, the hero overcame that. In deconstructing that, they actually made it, I would actually say it's a little less exciting and engrossing than the original one. And this one is even more, this happened and then that happened and this happened and then that happened. Because with Unferth here, it feels like he should have a character arc, but it doesn't actually go anywhere. So it's just, he doubted Beowulf, then he believed in Beowulf, and then he doubted Beowulf again.
Yep.
There's not much emotional weight to any of those transitions.
No, there really isn't. In fact, his shifting from untrusting to trusting was so abrupt that instinctually, as a informed movie watcher, I didn't trust it. I'm like, well, that was way too
really
easy. That couldn't possibly be sincere.
It was following the tropes of a false presentation.
Yes.
No, I see what you're saying there.
All right. So who should we move on to? So Grendel was Kristen Glover. I have nothing else to say about that.
Well, there's Angelina Jolie.
Yeah, well, we're getting to her. I'm saving her for the end.
Sorry for jumping the line.
Wow. Okay. Well, anyone else you want to talk about before we talk about Angelina Jolie? Let's go there.
Honestly, that was the only other one I remembered.
The only other one I would say, Alison Lohman played Ursula, and she was Beowulf's mistress.
Bed warmer, quote unquote.
Yeah, she was, because I guess he fell out with the queen.
Yeah, it's for the same reason that Hrothgar did when she learned that he lay with Grendel's mother. She wanted nothing to do with him.
Yeah, and when I read some of the notes on it, I think it was, and I didn't really get this from my watching of it, but I read in some of the notes that the sleeping with Grendel's mother was supposed to have made Beowulf sterile, which would have also explained why Hrothgar never got an heir either.
I suppose, but at the same time, it was, unless he was going to have additional infidelity, he wasn't going to.
Yeah, she wanted nothing. And I understand where she's coming from, because who knows? When you sleep with a water demon, who knows what you're picking up?
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, so she's also been in, She was in Gamer. You remember? Do you remember Gamer?
Never watched that one.
Oh, that was.
I do remember it though.
It was entertaining for all the wrong reasons. She was in Gamer. She was in Drag Me to Hell. So she's been in some other stuff. But all right. So now we get saving the best for last. Angelina Jolie as Grendel's mother. I almost said Beowulf's mother. I actually almost said that. That adds a whole different layer to this movie.
That might have been more interesting, oddly enough.
Yeah, Grendel's mother was played by Angelina Jolie. We never get to see her true form.
You kind of do at one point.
Yeah, you sort of see kind of a reflection, and she's sort of a lizard woman.
Yeah, you see her. You see the outline of her when Beowulf is in the cave and looking around, and like there's a whole bunch of gold at the top of the cave, and she's like pressed up, attached to the ceiling, and you see that. But other than that, and the reflections, no.
Yeah, she's mostly portrayed very much as Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
Who I really liked her performance in this. I kind of like what they did with her, how when she's like turning into the succubus type individual, she's kind of like half painted gold, half not.
Because there's definitely a lot of gold imagery, because even Grendel has gold scales at points on him.
Mm-hmm.
And Grendel's mother's gold, the gold man dragon gold. So
the golden horn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, if I'm to believe that came off the other dragon, the one that Hrothgar had slain, it just makes me believe that the other one he had slain would have also been a golden dragon. So would have also been, I would presume, one of Grendel's mother's children.
Offspring. It's implied that it was a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And Grendel's mother's been around for like thousands of years.
Yeah. So speaking of, as long you mentioned the cycle, and then all of a sudden it reminds me, we never mentioned who played Wiglaf.
Who did play Wiglaf?
Brendan Gleeson. So he's an old Irish actor. He was in Braveheart, Gangs of New York, 28 Days Later. I think he played someone in Harry Potter, but I don't really know Harry Potter well enough to know who he would have played. So I apologize. I'm not very Harry Potter fluent. So looking it up, I could tell you it was Alastor Mad Eye Moody. That means anything to you?
Not much.
No, yeah, I have no idea who he. I mean, he's been in a bunch of stuff. He's in things that are coming out this year and things that are going to be coming out next year. So he's a very active actor. But again, I just kind of listed some of the big things that I would have seen him from. But he doesn't really immediately jump out to me as somebody I recognize looking at him. So. Oh, you know what? He was in 28 Days Later. Did you see that movie?
A long time ago.
He was the dad. Remember when those people found like the dad and the younger girl, the teenage girl?
Mm-hmm.
He was the dad.
The one that got infected by the drop of blood in his eye?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's who he was, if you really want to place who he is. He was in Lake Placid, which was an awful movie, but he was the sheriff in that. I kind of remember him from that. All right, so now I think we've done a good enough job trying to establish who any of these people are. Unfortunately, we somehow managed to end with Brendan Gleeson instead of Angelina Jolie, which feels wrong to me on some level.
Yeah, you can fix it in post.
I'm not going to fix that in post.
I didn't say you would. I said you could.
Yeah, that's a true statement. I could fix that. I could also remove this little side conversation we're having about things I do in post. But we both know I won't. We both know this whole thing is making it to the final podcast.
Yes, we do.
All right, so the story, we've touched upon certain story elements, so we're not going to walk through the story because there's not really a whole lot. It's just stuff happens.
Yeah, I mean, I can recap the whole of Beowulf right now.
Yeah.
It's Hrothgar builds Heorot to celebrate his soldiers. Grendel is upset and starts killing people there. They call out for help. Beowulf comes, kills Grendel. Grendel's mother seeks revenge. Beowulf goes, kills Grendel's mother. Many years later, Beowulf has his own kingdom. A dragon comes and, terrorizes the land. Beowulf, as an older man, goes, kills the dragon, dies in the fight. He's buried a hero. That's your basic Beowulf.
Yeah, there you go. So we need to talk about some of these more iconic scenes, and the one that we could not avoid was the battle between Beowulf and Grendel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand they need to keep their PG-13 rating, but the idea that Beowulf was nude in the battle, that itself doesn't bother me so much because, all right, that's the direction they chose to go with it. But
that was in the original there too, actually.
Yeah, but since it's PG-13,
They keep coming up with...
Yeah, it's like the Austin Powers, like something's always blocking your view, and that became more distracting than anything else. I was paying more attention to all the different stuff that was very strangely and oddly presented in such a way, and all the camera angles that were going out of their way to try to put stuff in front of little Beowulf, that it was very distracting from the fight that I was supposed to be watching.
Yeah, because it gets to the point where its absence becomes distracting.
Right. I would almost rather, either you go full R and you play Dr. Manhattan, and
that's what I was going to say.
You just put it out there.
Either keep him in a loincloth or something, or go full Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, you just have to choose, because the idea of trying to do the nude fight, where at the same time having to constantly put things in the way. It was at one point,
especially if you're going to make him fight all flippy like that.
Yeah, like weird things are going, like you're trying to make, there's the steam from the weird Grendel blue fire that I don't know if that's from the original story or not, but the blue fire.
I got the
weird.
impression that there was something like that in the original, because when Grendel showed up, it like hellfire was going on. So
all right, but you had the smoke from that. You had the candles on the table. At one point, a sword gets tossed and jammed into the table in such a way that it would then block the view of Beowulf as he's coming through. It was a little forced. And I'm almost like, listen, I'm not saying that I'm advocating for more penises in movies, but when not having the penis becomes a distraction, I think I'd just rather have the penis.
Yeah, like I said, just either leave on the loincloth to remove it from consideration, or go full Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it was a particularly brutal fight.
Oh yeah. There's one of the soldiers had a full force slice right onto Grendel's head.
Mm-hmm. And then Grendel then bit that man's head off and chewed on it for a while.
Wiglaf stabbed him in the crotch repeatedly, which didn't do much.
And he makes a comment as much about that. Let's see, there was, so Beowulf punched out his eardrum.
Yeah, but Beowulf was about to have his ears ripped off until he just started screaming at Grendel.
His arms ripped off.
Yeah, there was a bit where Grendel picked up Beowulf and was pulling at his arms, and he just screamed to distract him.
Yeah. What else? Anything else? There was a lot of really forced 3D stuff where people flying at the screen and around the screen.
Yeah.
That was not so great. But it ends with Beowulf cutting off, well, I shouldn't say cutting off, basically slamming Grendel's arm in a door repeatedly until he actually severed it.
At the shoulder.
At the shoulder. Which I think something similar to that. Didn't that happen in the original?
Yes. Yeah. He ripped off Grendel's arm.
Yeah, so thus injuring Grendel and setting forth the series of events that you had mentioned earlier in your very brief and thorough recap of Beowulf.
Grendel goes back to visit his mother.
Right, and then they have a very, very lengthy conversation, almost entirely in Old English, which makes it very hard to tell what's happening.
Yeah.
But you get the point. And then there was this weird Grendel.
It's also weird after Beowulf punched in Grendel's ear, his whole body got smaller.
Yeah, I was about to say, there was this weird thing where Grendel was changing size.
Yeah.
Like he shrank during the fight after he got his ear punched in, and then after he died, he shrank even more to be almost the size of literally a 5-year-old.
Yeah, yeah. Because when after Grendel's mother came for revenge and Beowulf went out after her, he finds Grendel's body in her lair, and it's this little thing.
Yeah. And then we get one of the more iconic scenes of the movie is Angelina Jolie revealing herself and saying the line that was in every trailer, "Are you the one they call Beowulf?"
Yeah.
Then offers him the really, that's a hard deal to pass up, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. If you're Beowulf and you're being offered this, and we've already shown that Beowulf is not very discerning. I think at one point he doesn't recount the story, but we're led to believe that he fornicated with a mermaid.
Yeah, yeah.
The logistics of which I don't want to think about.
That was when Unferth was challenging him. and he recounted a tale of when he was in a swimming contest and they were set upon by sea monsters, which apparently legitimately happened as we see it, because the disconnect where we see that Beowulf isn't being completely forthright is when he talks about when he dove to kill another sea monster, and what we see is a mermaid who is beckoning him, which goes to his added character flaw in this of being rather lusty.
Right. And again, I just want to point out the logistics of human mermaid love. I mean, listen, not to knock Ariel and Prince Eric, but yeah, that's incompatible. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in any case.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is right in Beowulf's wheelhouse is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah. On top of which, I'd point out that he tried to hit her with the sword, and it went through her. The sword could not hurt her. He had nothing he could do to hurt her. That became quite obvious that he was, at least as the movie presented it, he was well out of his league if there was going to be a confrontation between the two.
Right. He had no prayer of walking out of there alive, except for taking the steel, quite frankly.
Exactly. Like, if he said no, do you think she's going to let him live?
Yeah, so...
She just completely melted the sword.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he didn't really have much of a choice. This sort of thing isn't the kind of thing he'd say, like, no, I'd rather choose death. This was right in his wheelhouse for kind of weird stuff that Beowulf was into, and it was a pretty cushy deal in that, like, you let me have this golden horn, and you sire a new son for me to replace the one you killed. Okay, I don't know how water demons work, but sure.
Yeah.
Then, I will, not only will you have endless strength, but you'll never be able to die. So,
and you'll have fantastic wealth and power.
Yeah. So it seemed like, well, I guess from Beowulf's, it's like it was really sort of you only had one real path out of that cave, and he took it. And the fact that he was able to benefit from that almost seemed like a happy coincidence.
Yeah. One thing in this sequence that I remember, there was, I want to say I read an interview with Zemeckis around the time that the movie came out, where he was pointing out the reason they did that this way is that in the original poem, there were no witnesses to Beowulf's actions in the cave killing Grendel's mother. And so if Beowulf were such a braggart, were such a sort of egotistical man, then, he probably would try to cover his tracks this way, to say he killed her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. So there was another scene, it was after this, and I think it's worth pointing out where I think the Frisians were invading Danes, and so Beowulf and his men were going after them, and there was that battle, and there's like the one guy left who Beowulf...
Finn the Frisian.
Yeah, Finn the Frisian. And Beowulf kind of taunts the guy and says, like, you can't kill me, like, I have this curse, whatever, that I cannot die.
Yeah, it's like he just straight up approaches the guy and like rips his shirt open. It's like, you want to be a hero? Come here, kill me right now, kill me.
And the guy just like drops his axe. I'm like, well, I mean, don't you want to just try, Finn? You came all this way for this exact moment, for this exact reason. Don't you want to just give it a shot?
Yeah, and that's why that's another one of those points where the seams really show in the storytelling.
Yeah, I get that they want to show that Beowulf does not really appreciate this gift all these years later, that he's basically just wishes that he could just not be where he is now, but... Yeah,
because he says, you know why you can't kill me? It's because I've already died many years ago, because I guess while he's a lusty braggart, the sort of... I'm going to say that the impact that the deal had on his character and conscience just weighed on him far too much.
Yeah.
Either that or it straight up was a curse, but I don't know.
I'm going to go with the conscious one, just because it at least makes the character a little bit more justified. But then as you said before, Unferth's slave ends up finding the horn, which undoes the full deal. So
yeah,
I imagine at that point, not only does it provide Angelina Jolie, I should say Grendel's mother, with, she now has the hall pass to go in and start harassing his kingdom, but I think it basically undoes his I can't die deal anymore.
Yeah, I guess.
I would think. He still seemed pretty powerful after that.
Well, I mean, he's a legendary hero.
He is the one they call Beowulf.
Yes, he is.
And so then that leads to the dragon confrontation, which I
there's not a whole lot to say about it.
Yeah, when at the beginning of the movie, when Hrothgar is showing Beowulf the horn and mentions the point on the bottom of the dragon, which is the only point it could be heard on, I knew then, right then and there, that at the end of this movie there will be a dragon, and Beowulf is going to have to use that little chunk of knowledge.
Yeah.
It's so broadcast and it's so out of place when he explains it to him that I just knew it. I just said, like, yeah, that's gonna happen, and it did. In an interesting and brutal way, I should say, and that Beowulf actually has to sever his own arm off in order to get enough leverage to rip the heart directly out of the dragon.
Yeah, that whole sequence was actually pretty weird because when the dragon fight starts, he winds up getting on the back of the dragon. They have being dragged by chains that got stuck to the dragon. There's kind of a Shadow of the Colossus kind of
doesn't he like spear the dragon with a rope in order to catch a ride on it at first?
Yeah, something like that. Because for a pretty good chunk, he's hanging by a chain that's attached to the dragon.
Right.
And in the end, the dragon is attacking Beowulf's castle, and Beowulf is kind of swinging around by the chain and happens, fortunately enough, to be in striking distance of that weak spot. He slices it open, and one of the nice touches they had is whenever the dragon breathes fire after that, there's stuff spilling out of the slit in the throat.
Mm-hmm.
And he tries to reach in with his sword and stab at the heart that is for some reason in the throat.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say that's the dragon's throat heart, not its main heart.
Because it was also a very small heart.
Yeah.
Given the size, it was smaller than a human heart.
That's why it's its throat heart.
Yeah, his throat heart.
It's just there to help make sure that the blood gets to the brain when it's vertical.
Yeah.
But
sure.
It makes about as much sense as anything.
Just that's more thought than Robert Zemeckis put into it.
Probably. But he tries to stick his arm in once as he's swinging on the chain. He sticks the arm into the hole. The sword can't make it. He tries it again. The sword can't make it. And that's when he reaches into the neck of his chainmail and severs his arm. So he's just hanging by his arm is still holding. I just realized his arm was still holding onto the chain after it got severed off.
The chain was wrapped several times around his arm.
Yeah, and then
they showed that his arm was basically wrapped so far in the chain that even if he let go, he was still secured.
Yeah, and then so now it was just the chain mail that was holding him on. He tries to stab again now that he's got another couple inches, but the dragon just swallowed some rubble and it knocks the sword out of his hand.
Yep. And
at one point in there, he was also burned by the fire breath coming through the throat until he gets, I don't know, he sees that Wiltho and Ursula are in trouble, and he just gets inspired enough to try one more time. And this time, despite the fact that he doesn't have the extra couple feet that the sword gives him, his hand reaches all the way into the heart and just rips it out barehanded.
Yeah, he finally did something that he could have done any point in time prior to that, before he was inspired, was kicked off the dragon to build enough momentum on the way back through that instead of reaching with some space, he could actually stick his whole arm into the throat slit.
Oh, that was the difference. I never noticed that was the only time he kicked.
That was the only time he kicked off the dragon.
Oh my goodness. He didn't even have to sever his arm off the first time, huh?
He did not. No, that was all completely unnecessary.
This really feels to me like Ultra Magnus on the planet Junkion, right after he got the Autobot Matrix of Leadership, light our darkest hour is the first trouble he's run into. It's I better open the Matrix of Leadership.
Yeah, I always think that's funny. The very first piece of adversity he had, he's like, well, this is our darkest hour. That's kind of supposed to be a last resort when all the lesser means of fate. That's not your go-to.
So that's...
You can't just open the Matrix of Leadership.
So
just because things are getting a little rough.
It's Beowulf's version. It's oh man, I can't reach. Well, I could kick off and gain. Nah, I'm not going to kick off and gain momentum. That sounds like a lot of work. I'm just going to cut my arm off.
Yeah.
That'll give me another couple inches.
Yes, that's sure. Oh, Beowulf. But that ends up killing him. He falls down to the beach. At some point in there, I think he mentioned right before he went into Grendel's mother's cave the second time that he already set things up so Wiglaf would become the new king. He tried to confess to Wiglaf, like, hey, by the way, this is what I did to screw the pooch here, so don't do this. And Wiglaf wouldn't have any of it. Wants to preserve the legend of Beowulf, as it were.
Yeah, he's a hero.
Yeah, so then at the
That's
end...
all anyone needs to know,
yeah,
right?
At the end... Grendel's mother kisses Beowulf goodbye while he's on his funeral pyre. The boat sinks, and then she approaches Wiglaf, and then it ends very ambiguously.
And interminably.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an odd way to say it, that the end was interminable, but it was. Like, I remember just in the theater when I was watching it, because they keep changing between shots of Grendel's mother looking at Wiglaf and Wiglaf looking at her. It's just like they keep going back and forth and slowly zooming in on each face. And it's like, I don't know, 2 solid minutes of that.
Yeah.
You think, all right, get on with it. If you're setting it up like this, something has to happen. Have him turn his back or something. Jeez. And then you just get the credits. You're like, what the?
It really felt like they thought, like, well, how could we make it ambiguous so that there's plenty of speculation? You know,
and the way it was done was just infuriating.
Yeah, but as long as we're here, this is hero talk, and we speculate. It's what we do. What do you think happened?
This was presented to be a telling of Beowulf that was supposed to be something that could exist in the real world. You know, within a suspension of disbelief.
Right.
Which would imply to me that there aren't any monsters around, so the cycle must have ended somewhere.
So you're gonna go with Wiglaf ended the cycle.
That's kind of what I'm gonna go with.
Yeah. You know what? Me too. I'm gonna give Wiglaf the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, he wasn't trapped in her cave like Beowulf or Hrothgar were.
Yeah.
And so she didn't have the threat of killing him over his head. Mm-hmm. And he was the one who was terrified of going in there before, and he's also seen at least the results of 2 cycles of this. So. Yeah. And Beowulf basically told him that he had screwed up. He was there for it. So
yeah. So there you go. That's the real hero of Beowulf is Wiglaf.
Yeah. He's like Samwise Gamgee.
Mm-hmm.
He's the real hero.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. I think that's enough talking about Beowulf.
We're gonna do favorite scenes.
Yeah. So what was your favorite scene? It's time for favorite scenes. What was your favorite scene from Beowulf?
I'm actually going to have to say my favorite scene was the confrontation between Beowulf and Grendel's mother, just because that was the most interesting one. It was certainly modified because in the original story, it was just a big old fight. But there was actually some drama there in this one.
Yeah.
Kind of like we said, is where you could say, like, look, if you think about it, he either has to acquiesce to her demands or die.
Yeah. And
this is the one time where Beowulf is clearly way out of his depth.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say same scene, same reason. And I'm allowed to do that. But yeah, it's that was my favorite part of the movie for that exact same reason, because there was something interesting going on there, because it was about the only actual part of the movie where there were actually some subtext going on. Character
moments going on.
Right. So I'm going to pick
on-screen growth of some sort.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Sure. All right. So
for a second one, I do have a runner-up, though.
Oh, okay. An honorable mention, if you will.
Is after Beowulf returns from this, and he is speaking with Hrothgar, and Hrothgar asks, "Did you actually kill her?"
Yeah.
And Beowulf's like, "I brought the head of the demon of the witch's child. Isn't that proof enough?" He says, "You and I both know she's not a hag," or whatever it was.
Yeah, he says, "I brought the hag's child," and he says, "You and I both know she's not a hag." Yeah, it was very telling that Hrothgar knew that.
Yeah, and then he comes out. And then Hrothgar comes out and says, "All right, when I die, I want all of my wealth, my entire kingdom, even my wife, to go to Beowulf. Absolutely everything." And then he just walks off to the window and does a wearing Hudsucker. He just jumps right out the window.
Yeah. So there was a point. I'm glad you mentioned this.
I just love that, because it was like, tag, you're it. It's your problem now, man. Yeah. I am done with this.
He's like, you got the football. But there was
he must have slipped.
Yeah, after he jumped off, though, like the waves took him, and there was this golden flash that brought him away.
Yeah.
And they never said what that was. I kind of thought that was Grendel's mother, because she,
oh yeah,
she's still they sired a son together, and that she took him.
Did she have feelings for him or something? It's the same way that Grendel's mother came for Beowulf on his funeral pyre.
Yeah, like, I think she still had feelings for him, and so she took him away to wherever she keeps the skeletons of the people she's been siring sons with all this time, and Beowulf's there too now.
Yeah.
Till Wiglaf ended the cycle.
Yep.
But yeah, that was I especially liked when Beowulf is like telling the extremely fake story of how he killed her. And he's like, well, when I removed the sword, she sprung back to life, so I had to stick it back in and leave it there. And that's why I didn't bring the sword back, everybody.
And Unferth is like, yeah, the sword was good.
Yeah.
The sword I gave you. Yeah.
And like, what about the horn? Well, I had to throw the horn into the swamp to lure her out. And then I killed her with the sword. Your sword. Remember? It was so ham-fisted, but
artificial.
but it made me chuckle.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess if I had an honorable mention, it was the scene that immediately preceded the scene that was your honorable mention.
Yeah.
I think now is the time on Hero Talk where we can give this movie a score.
Okay.
All right, and as I am wont to remind you, review scores are dumb and they don't matter. And the review score you're about to hear from us is going to be mostly nonsensical, and it doesn't mean anything, because we're presuming you've probably already seen this movie, and it doesn't matter what score we give it, and because you've already listened to the whole review, you know what we think already. I don't see what a number is going to do to solve that. So, now that we've established that, Nick, what would you score Beowulf?
I'm going to give it Grendel's Dentist.
Grendel's Dentist. That's fair enough. I'm going to give Beowulf some digital dangling Beowulf bits. Because it could use them.
Yes, it could.
They would have helped the story. All right. So before we close out, it's time for final thoughts. So Nick, do you have any final thoughts?
So like I said, I've gone through the original Beowulf, I've gone through this movie, I've gone through the 13th Warrior, and I've read Eaters of the Dead. And for one thing, I was actually very surprised at how faithful an adaptation of Eaters of the Dead, the 13th Warrior, was. And I'm actually even surprised that one of the complaints about the movie was that the other Vikings didn't get enough character growth when they barely had names in Eaters of the Dead. They actually had way more character in the movie than they did in the book.
Interesting.
That isn't to say that the movie is a completely accurate representation. There were a couple of changes that are weird and would have fit more with Beowulf if they had stuck with the book. But all in all, it was way closer than I had been led to believe. So actually, of all of the tellings of Beowulf, Eaters of the Dead and the 13th Warrior are my favorites.
Mine too. All right. And my final thoughts. I very recently had the opportunity to be a guest on another podcast outside of the Enthusiacs podcast channel. So I was on Gamers Without Borders, and if you want to catch that podcast, then if you go to Enthusiacs.com and click on the link for the Beowulf Hero Talk, I will provide a link to Gamers Without Borders so that you can listen to me being a guest on another podcast. So thank you very much to Nick and Dapper, who had me on. Very gracious
and
host.
And that's not me, Nick, I presume.
Not you, Nick, no. Thank you very much to Gamers Without Borders, Nick, and Dapper for having me on your podcast. I had a good time. I hope you enjoyed having me on as well, because otherwise that's just kind of sad for me. But not really sure where I'm going with this now. It's gotten a little self-deprecating, but so thanks so much. And if you're a fan of Hero Talk, please give a listen to Gamers Without Borders, and you can listen to me on that came out just last week as of recording time of this podcast. All right, Nick, thanks for coming on with me.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we had a good time. If you want to check out any more content from us, you can check out Enthusiacs.com. You can also find us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Just search for Enthusiacs. Any feedback or any movies you want to hear us review, you can just send an email to herotalk@enthusiacs.com. And until next time, this is Judge Greg asking, are you the one they call Beowulf?